Thanks so much for coming down, Raeland. It's
Thanks
nice
for having
to,
me. Thanks
it's
for having me.
really nice to be here. I know you're a busy guy and have so much on the go. And yeah, thanks for
Oh,
being here.
happy to make time. I'm happy
Cool.
to make time.
So you are the founder and creative director of I'll Call You Tomorrow.
Yes.
And same with Tomorrow Works, your creative consultancy. Is
hmm
that right?
That is it. Yeah.
Um, you have had a chance to be featured in GQ magazine, if I'm not mistaken,
hmm
right?
hmm
Which is amazing. You also worked with multiple brands such as like Reigning Champ, Kitten Ace. Had a chance to live in Vancouver,
hmm
and
hmm
now you're back here. So before we get to why you came back to this amazing city of Edmonton, tell me about your backstory and where your journey to creating I'll Call You Tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. So born and raised from Edmonton, to like a immigrant family, Filipino. Studied textiles coming up and was just basically obsessed with like fashion and like subculture. Like from all I can remember is like just being really into whether it was like music, fashion, art. And that led me to working like whether or not it was like retail, school, studying textiles, and then all my whole family are from like in a bunch of different contexts working in like the garment industry.
Interesting.
So I've only ever really known fashion my whole life. And then that led me to when I finished school, going down to Vancouver for a little bit and then, yeah, cutting my teeth in the industry down there.
Hmm.
But even a little bit right before that, I was just doing some like really fun creative
Yeah,
projects
because
with
I
my
met you before
friends.
you went to
Yep.
Vancouver.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I'll Call You Tomorrow. We first started just working in nightlife, just kind of like throwing parties, throwing events, a couple art shows here and there. Product wasn't even like on our radar.
So no
Um,
apparel yet, just throwing
no
parties.
apparel. Our very first pop up after like 2 years of doing parties. This is like maybe like 2016 by then, 2016, 2017. We were literally like throwing t-shirts out of a DJ booth because like we didn't even consider like retail or like customer
Right.
experience. And that was like mostly just like really fun, kind of creating some local ripples in the local scene, but it didn't turn into like what it was right now.
Did you want it to, or you're just kind of testing the waters
I
and
think we were really just exploring at that point because like our origin story really came from me and all my friends were all creative, and whether they were all musicians, producers, artists, or like DJs, and then I really was like I drew more towards like the marketing and the design aspect, and then we just were looking to put it under like an umbrella essentially,
Mhm.
and that's what the like first iteration of I'll Call You Tomorrow was. Went on hiatus when I left for Vancouver, came back right before the pandemic. And
Why'd
then
you come back? First of all, why'd you go to Vancouver?
yeah, I got a really crazy opportunity to intern for a really talented designer by the name Tung Vo. So he was leading the charge at Reigning Champ. He actually went on to go work for Haven, and then he actually just came back to Reigning Champ. But I studied under him for a little bit.
Amazing. Do you learn a lot?
I learned a lot. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Both
Um,
amazing brands, Reigning Champ and Haven. We know
totally.
we
And
know the
just
brothers at Haven from Edmonton
yes.
also.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Was DMing with one of them the other day, and to even just be working around that space as a kid from Edmonton, being like obsessed with like streetwear and like menswear and product, walking in that step was like a really profound time in my life for sure.
What are some of the key takeaways you learned from him?
Ooh, for me, for Reigning Champ and like thinking about my time in Vancouver working there, always comes down to consistency. Like I still remember seeing what it takes to perform at that such high level consistently season after season after season and never diluting your focus. That's something I bring towards like all my stuff these days.
Right.
Mhm.
I think both brands, minimal amount of pieces, focus
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah, yeah.
quality and
Mhm.
and not like big distribution. Just let's focus on the best possible
Totally.
apparel that we can come up with.
Yeah. But took that time, came back, and was just really kind of burnt out from living in the fashion, like living in the city for a little bit. I hit
It's
kind of
supposed to be
like
a laid back West Coast life. What happened?
I'm really not like a laid back person though. If anything,
Right.
I've always loved like the East Coast more. Like
Mm.
half my family's from Mississauga and Toronto and the
Okay.
GTA, and I spent a lot of time there growing up. Vancouver, honestly, I could just never crack the code of it feeling like home. And I hit a point in my life where like it was around the time that unfortunately I went through a pretty nasty breakup. The first friend I made in the city ended up passing away
Oh no.
unexpectedly. And then I ended up just like professionally just was in a spot that I just didn't like where it was headed. And I was like starting to freelance. I had left Reigning Champ at the time, was working for Kitten Ace, and was just like just lost, didn't really have a direction. And I was like, you know what? I need to take stock. I want to come back home. I miss working with my friends. I need some family time. Came back. I thought I was only gonna spend 6 months in Edmonton, save up some money, go to Toronto maybe. And then the pandemic hit, I think like 3 weeks into that.
So it's a big
Um,
ripple in everyone's
Totally.
plans.
And like set everything on pause. But it was great because the silver lining for me is that it really let me take into stock everything. Um,
Sometimes you need those. Like,
I
obviously the pandemic is very terrible and,
totally,
affects so many
totally.
people. But if you can take, you got to look into what you can take out of it, right?
I definitely needed it at that time to just at least pause. But during that time, me and my friends decided to revisit I'll Call You Tomorrow. We did a couple online events.
And people were asking too, right?
People
They're
were
like,
like
people were
looking for it.
wanting.
People,
Yeah.
in the time that we were the most separated, people were looking for community.
Right.
And that's all we've ever really known. And that's all like that was the start of everything we did. And then
So you couldn't do the parties, but the apparel started rolling out,
yes,
right?
so
Yeah.
that's where either it was apparel, online events, or where we would do like kind of more sit down events at restaurants. But we did like 2 or 3 t-shirt drops and they just kept selling faster and faster and
Yeah.
faster. And then next thing you know, it turns into like
You
more
got
and
to have it
more.
in. That's why I
Yeah.
was able to get this. You got to have it in,
And then yeah, fast forward a couple years, we're doing like collaborations all across the country and
The
yeah.
world, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah,
world.
yeah. And we're all over the place now. Our web shop is global, goes crazy. Like
Yeah.
we're shipping stuff out to like Europe, Morocco, all over Asia.
So
Um,
places you would never expect.
yeah, to people who I don't know, and it's a pretty wild idea. Even like whenever I get really stressed out, to kind of like zoom out and think that there's like a couple thousand of our hats just floating in the world.
Yeah. That's amazing. So rewind. It's not an easy journey whatsoever, but a lot of people, who may be listening, they want to get into the fashion industry. They want to build their own apparel. They want to build their own lines. And how do you take that first step? Like, what's the first steps to get there?
I always kind of come back to this of like the first step before even moving forward is like getting to know yourself
Mm,
and like asking who do you want to be as a designer? What kind of product do I want to make? What story am I trying to tell? What is good product for me? And then that'll inform all of the other questions of like, whether it's like what type of product, what manufacturers are you going to, what brand are you building,
you
all that
design
kind
your
of stuff.
pieces as well
I
too.
do. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So um
And
I
what if
s-
you don't have? You want to create your own label, but you don't. You're not a designer yourself. Do you outsource that? Do you find a partner? Do you?
little
What's
bit of everything if you really need to, but I mean, I always like if you have the ability to and time to do so, I would just learn how to do it, right? Like yeah, I went to fashion school, but there's so much knowledge out there. Like even me studying textiles, the amount of times that I'd be on YouTube being like, how to do this on Photoshop, how to make, as simple as like a tech pack, or what type of like, how do I approach this one problem? Even if you're outsourcing parts of your equation, learning how to speak that language to those designers, to those other vendors, to those other partners, if you can communicate how they are expecting you to communicate or like their language,
right?
it'll make that problem that much easier to solve,
Right. You're on their
essentially.
wavelength.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How do you even start to find your own suppliers? That's another one too. Like, where do you begin with those?
Man, it could be as simple as, I mean,
Pick up the
everyone,
phone and call.
yeah, pick up at the phone and call, or like the amount of mountains we've been able to move just off of like DMs or just a very well written email,
Hmm.
or just a really well written LinkedIn message that just be a nice, polite, courteous person. Most of the times you can get the information out
Right.
there. Yeah.
So here's a tight knit community. If you wanted to, let's say, use the same factory as XYZ brand, it's not that easy just to get your product there or buy from, anywhere. You kind of have to have it in, or you got to do something.
Little bit, but like things are kind of changing. Like I know people will ask me like, "Hey, what factory does this get made? Does that get made?" For me personally, most of the time, as long as you ask me in a again nice and courteous way, I'll straight up tell you which factories our stuff
Right.
gets made. It really just
Before it
comes,
was like almost like a hidden secret. People used to like to
yeah,
keep that
or
to
I don't know.
themselves, right?
My thing was like, I can't. I guess maybe I'm a little bit younger in this sense because that is a little bit of an older way of thinking, where it's like, for me at least, if your strengths and all your skill as a designer, as a creative, if it comes down to like one specific factory or one specific font pack or one specific file you found on the internet, that doesn't actually make you a good designer,
Hmm.
right? Like it's about how do you take the tools, what's given around you, and put it together in a way that speaks to an audience, resonates with a message, and also just moves the needle culturally, right?
Mm, big one.
Yeah.
Moving the culture. That's a hard one to be like, how would I do that? If they want to do, but I think you got to be like, be yourself in that and design
Totally.
what
And
you
like
want to make.
no one can move the needle how,
Yeah.
anyone else can, right?
So you talked about all those. What inspires the pieces that you come up with every, season? I guess that would be.
Yeah, yeah. For I'll Call You Tomorrow specifically, I really go back to like what drew like my golden age of streetwear, which is like kind of that like early 2000s, a lot of like early Stussy, a lot of like
I missed the early Stussy.
yeah, right? Like I was obsessed with like LRG growing up as a kid.
I
Like
had the zip up
yeah,
too.
right?
I had
Like
the.
Karma Loop, Mark
Where are
Echo,
those
all
guys
that kind
now?
of stuff. They just sold off their
Yeah.
companies and they're just
Right.
chilling. Like, what is it? The guy from Diamond
Yeah.
Supply or the Hundreds, right?
Yeah,
All
I was
that
a
kind of
skater when
stuff.
I was young, and I liked the pig, the fashion of that
Totally.
part as well too.
Yeah,
And now it's trendy.
yeah. Even for me, I was always trash at basketball, but I played basketball as a kid because I was obsessed with the culture all around
Mhm.
it and seeing how other teams when I would go play on like tournaments and stuff, how they would style their jerseys or what
Mhm.
sneakers they were wearing, what warm-up song are they playing to, would inform like what part of the city they're from, what they're into, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
How do you bring that into what pieces you create? Because you have to be very intentional about the pieces that
Mhm.
come out for the next season, next drop, and picking those right pieces are important because that translate. And you have
Yeah.
to. You're a global company now, so you have to
Yeah,
be able to
yeah,
cater to
yeah.
all those markets, whether it be in
Mhm,
Morocco,
mhm.
here in Edmonton, in Hong Kong, wherever that may be, in London. How do you get inspired to make the right thing? And I asked that question because I think you came up with the pink vest, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. The camera on
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love that, but
Mhm.
that's very different.
Totally.
It stands out, right? And it's not the everyday, piece that people are gonna want. Where did you come up with that inspiration for that line? What draws you for that? Is it a team thing? Is it you? Um,
It's a little bit of the team thing, and a lot of the product and designs really just comes down to, like, what we're into and how is it a reflection of us, and I know that, like, me and my crew were into such a wide array of different, like, subcultures and different references. If we're into it, I know other people are gonna be into it. Then the job then comes to me.
what's a subculture?
Oh, it could just be like, genres of music or different
Okay,
kind of like different communities, like, right? Like whether it's like art styles or like, as simple as just like you're into skateboarding. Maybe you're into a certain like crew of skateboarding from a different place.
right.
Or I'm really into like, let's say, nightlife happening in Asia or something like that. That's in itself like a subculture. Taking those little references, putting it in a way that is still true to that, but still kind of accessible and honestly just putting it together in a kind of an equation or a way that just like looks really like speaks to us, right? And people can get into essentially. And then the rest, honestly, just I try to just exist in a vacuum and try not to overthink the whole thing. And if you like it, by the time waiting through the production cycle, like you're gonna like it when it comes out.
And do you feel more pressure now that you have to meet these kind of deadlines versus just doing what you had to do before on your own pace? Does that
Yes,
change the
yeah,
dynamic of things as an artist and as a creator?
it does, but like I just lean into it. Like again, it kind of comes down to that consistency. Like if you can perform when there's all the pressure here, you can perform when there's no pressure. And if it's all the same, really, to me. And one thing I learned, like again, being at Reigning Champ, taking that time in the West Coast where to truly see what it takes, you're designing things 4 seasons in advance at any given moment. And that's still the same standard that I keep with I'll Call You Tomorrow. And like,
So you got to think 4 steps ahead all the time.
yeah, so 4 seasons product wise is two
Two,
calendar
two, right?
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're
So
thinking ahead to what's
mhm.
coming next.
And like, even though I'll Call You Tomorrow is certainly a lot smaller than that, I still design pretty much 4 seasons in advance as much as possible. Yeah.
Right. Do you categorize your clothing or gear like it's not tech wear, it's not streetwear, what or you don't like having those labels? Right.
I mean, for the sake of like retail, it kind of helps.
Mm,
We exist in streetwear
right.
to make things simple. Like we get asked sometimes, like, would you do a fashion show? Would you do that? I'm not really that into that, just because like streetwear is not really meant for that.
Hmm.
Um, and like that's also just what I came up with. Like I'm personally really into kind of like the more elevated menswear stuff and streetwear, and slowly our customers getting ready for that, and like our platform and our audience is like down for both. But as it stands, like our bread and butter is like streetwear, right?
Right. Um, you have pop-up shops and amazing retail stores. You have retail partners. How do you, for someone who's looking to get into fashion, I think that's a big thing. And I get asked that question by, some friends of ours. They have a, small clothing line or emerging clothing line. They
Mhm.
want to get into retail partners. They just don't know where to begin. What would be your advice for those labels and brands?
I mean, I always just kind of think, even locally, like Edmonton or not, there's always a city where like there's a long-standing streetwear boutique, right? Like whether it's Foosh, a livestock, anything like that. Take the time to like go down there, properly just explore, see what they're into, see what their story is, see what kind of products are on their shelves, get to know the people there, and then even then ask yourself like, will my stuff fit there, right?
Mm.
Like not everything you make will fit in
And you
that
have to
store.
align with them as well. It's a
Totally,
two-way
right?
street.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
like, after that, then you can, again, just be in like, communicate, be transparent, be like, "Hey, I have something going on. Maybe not this season, but, because typically buying happens a good, like, 1 to 2 seasons in advance. This is how like, have your assets ready, have a line sheet, this is what we're about, take a look, see if it kinda strikes some intrigue, and also then don't be scared by rejection because 'cause you're gonna get a lot of no's."
Right.
Yeah. That and just focus on building out your own stuff because, like, at the same time, when the store is gonna take on a new brand, they have to know that it has to be able to sell, right? And it has to be a prior existing audience there.
Right. Did you get a lot of no's when you first
All the
started off?
time.
All the
Yeah, yeah, all
time?
the
Yeah.
time. We started out, like, even way back in the day, like, venues wouldn't let us do parties or, like, it took us a while to even figure out, like, what our retail and events kinda like how does that even mold together,
Mhm.
right? And during that process, always a lot of
Finding that
no's.
synergy is hard.
Yeah.
But now people are gladly accepting
Yeah.
your your events that fill up the room.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally.
So I'll Call You Tomorrow is awesome, and it's amazing global brand, and that spun off into Tomorrow Works.
Yes.
So we've had conversations here and there over the past few years, and you always catch me up on things, which is amazing. Tomorrow Works is a creative consultancy,
Mhm.
branding, event space, everything. How did that come about? It's just naturally came together, and someone's like, "I need your help," you know.
Mhm, mhm. Pretty
Uh,
much, and honestly, a big part of that, I always kinda like when I can, I wanna give you your flowers and that you've been, like, a mentor figure, OG in my
Thank
life
you.
to just kinda be like, "What does agency life look like?" Because traditionally, I don't actually have, like,
Mhm.
traditional
Me
agency
neither.
experience, right? Like or like, what is that,
Yeah.
right? Like, but yeah, it really kinda spun out where people would ask us, "Hey, we saw this moment for I'll Call You Tomorrow. How do I get that?" And eventually those questions kept coming up or then I'm like, "Why don't you just hire me for it or hire our team to do it?" And
Yeah.
then that's what Tomorrow Works became. Yeah.
Yeah. Any notable projects that you want to mention that you worked on recently?
I think it's releasing soon, which I can talk about. We did some product for North of the Border, which is an eyewear agency in Toronto.
Okay.
They rep everything from like Garrett Light to Moscot, some pretty big names in the eyewear space. Locally, I just wrapped up a really fun project with Familia Brewing. And if anything, Tomorrow Works then just kind of lets us do what we do best to a lot of really like-minded creators and collectives all across the country.
Right.
Yeah. So like a lot of cool stuff happening in both in like Vancouver, Toronto. Yeah.
Yeah. And that helps people be able to have those experiences, for their company and for their brand as you did
Totally.
with I'll Call You Tomorrow.
And it was always really strategic too, in that Tomorrow Works, our portfolio is this ever growing and living platform. I'll Call You Tomorrow. So
Mm.
whenever people like, we have a portfolio and all that kind of stuff, but if they want to see it in action, it's like there
And
already.
I love that
Yeah,
because you have a real life example of, hey, yes, I have this service that, people call up. If they
totally.
want to see a real example, look, we have this in the work every single day.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah,
doing it,
yeah. We
as we
drop it,
speak.
2 to 3
Yeah.
times a month.
Real life
So
example. You're in Edmonton, and a lot of, I've had a lot of friends and people I know, acquaintances, and they are, let's say, in the fashion industry. They're like, their first thing is, let's get out of Edmonton. There's no opportunity here. There's no connections. I don't meet the right people. I can't get my brand out there. All this, I guess, would be negative stuff, but not
yeah.
necessarily negative. But it's true. The big guys are not here. This is not
Mhm.
the place to be. Why do you believe this is the place to be, and why do you stay here and build your company out of Edmonton?
It's funny because I feel like I'm definitely not immune to that. I'm always kind of wrestling with that idea.
Hmm.
Though I lean into it in the sense of like, the world's a big place. I have the internet. I can
I
bring
think we all
like
we all have internet,
right? We all have the same
right?
internet. We all have the same Google. I have LinkedIn. I have Instagram. I can connect the dots as much as I can, being in the city that supports us and has helped us get to the point that we're at. Like, being on GQ and talking about our local Chinatown was such a core moment for me
Yeah.
that if I were to like take us outside of that, it feels a little disingenuous to our crew, or it feels a little bit disingenuous to what we say, why we started. That being said, it can always evolve and turn into different things. But for me right now, it always feels like I need to stay true to that. And that's why we're here. But even looking forward to it, I'm really into this like idea of if I'm staying in Edmonton, I'm bringing the world here. So
Right.
like whether that's through collaborations, different projects, different partnerships, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah, you mentioned you're featured in GQ. How does one get a feature in GQ? Even though
Um,
the everyday person gets that, how did
no,
that come
no,
about?
yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, Yang, who has now become like a friend of ours, just caught us on Instagram,
Yeah.
and he really liked what he saw. And we have some like, I think we have some mutual connections, though not really formalized in Toronto, because he's Canadian as well.
Hmm.
And he just liked the message that we were doing, and then he put us up on GQ, and he's been
That's
rocking our stuff ever since.
that's amazing. Did that help like propel, the brand awareness?
It definitely did. It definitely did. Though I always kind of take those things in stride of like whenever those big looks come, it has to be everything else has to be ready for it, right? Like our back end, I run it pretty tight so that every season, if something like that does happen, we're prepared.
Right. What's next for I'll Call You Tomorrow? I know it's evolving brand, a lot of cool things coming up. What's next in terms of events or apparel? Something exciting.
We're at the end of this month, we're launching a pop up and like an actual bowling night
Bowling night.
at Plaza
Right.
Bowling Co.
Yep.
It's like local mainstay, retro bowling alley. We did like a collab with them, which is like a 1950s style bowling shirt with like chain stitching all the way through. That's most immediate, and then after that, we're working on kind of in that whole vein of like I can't say too much of like the bigger scale stuff, but yeah, if our cruise is still in Edmonton, I'm bringing the world here,
That's
kind of thing.
awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
About yourself a little bit. I've never not seen you in a hat or a beanie. Why is that? How to never
um,
not a beanie? Beanie's a thing for you, right? Like
Beanie's a thing,
beanie and
hat's
toque
still
thing.
a thing, and it's
Yeah,
also like I've always been a hat guy.
it's summer. You're wearing a
Um,
toque,
it's
always
fall, it's
fall now.
pre-fall,
Yeah, but
pre-fall. Very similarly to RJ in the back, I also have a shaved head,
mhm.
so hairline's still strong, but not definitely still by choice. Always just been into hats, honestly, and
Yeah.
that's always
How
kind of been
many
my thing.
how many toque beanies do you have? You'd
Oh,
say
it's like endless. Yeah, yeah.
hundreds?
It's up there, and like
Yeah.
especially just working in the industry for so long, it's like just grab one from the pile and just like put it
Yeah.
on.
Feel like you're not a creative director until you have a mini hat or
Yeah, yeah. The
yeah,
trope is like is
yeah,
that it doesn't touch your ears, right?
yeah. Yours
Um,
are not touching yours right now.
no.
That's why you're a good creative director.
And I am a strong believer in like having a uniform. So like
Mm.
it's all usually pretty minimal.
Tattoos is part of your persona as well.
Yes, yes, yes.
You're a big tattoo guy.
Mhm.
How many you have?
I've lost
Lost
count
count?
long time ago.
Yeah.
Last time I counted probably like 50,
Yeah. Is
something
there
around there.
one artist that you go to for, a certain style or one you do that's all your work or is it in the moment kind of thing that you
Started out like with one person or at least two or three, and then now it's kind of just grown to be like whenever the moment kind of strikes, and it's like a cool way to document just like cool moments in life, and especially even being Filipino, tattooing is like at the core of that culture if you like really dig deep into it.
really? Can you
Hmm.
tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, like to my understanding for it, and like definitely probably paraphrasing a little bit here, but pre-colonial Philippines, heavily tattooed island people. If you look at the etymology of it, going through like Polynesia and stuff like that, the Western word for tattoo comes from a Polynesian word, I believe, tatao, which also has roots to the Filipino word tatak, which means marking or it
Mm,
means truth. And yeah, so if anything, that's like the closest thing to document your life and like even remember where you came from, see where you're going, is like marking it on your skin.
so every tattoo has a story.
Yeah, to an extent.
Anyway,
Yeah. Maybe like not some big
yeah.
life altering meaning, but it's a story enough to that, put it on there. Hmm.
To those who want to, I know we're gonna have a lot of listeners who are interested in fashion here,
Hmm.
and some people tell me like, I want to start a fashion label or brand, and they never end up doing it or they never take a step. What is like, how would they get started? What's the first step to just, you know, And I always just tell them, just do it, just get started, just go. But it's not easy as well too.
Yeah.
What would your personal piece of advice through your journey, and you did it through a time where we had the pandemic as well too, which is a very difficult time to do
Yes.
anything. What would you say to the young you, now?
And if anything, it's like figure out one item that you can design year after year after year after
I like
year,
that a lot.
something evergreen that you love designing.
Yeah,
So for me, it's actually headwear. So like whether it's like beanies, hats, bucket hats, anything, I can do those till the cows come home.
right.
But I'll never get tired probably
Start with
designing
one
that.
item.
One thing, put all your energy into that and see where it goes from there.
See
And
how the
like,
consumer thinks, how the
yeah.
market thinks.
Yeah, and then you can evaluate and like spend time thinking about also like with that one piece, it really lets you control how do you talk about product? How do you present it? How do you show it in a way to like your consumer to like then present this idea of like a lifestyle? Um, and it because there's only one piece, it's like very controllable. And then it lets you kind of reflect on that afterwards,
Mhm.
like in terms of what worked, what didn't, what's your retail numbers looking like, all that kind of stuff.
Right. And is there anything that I know, drawing from what inspired you, is there like any books or maybe YouTube videos or channels that you follow
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
really helped you along your journey that could help others?
Um, I always go back to I listen to a lot of Virgil Abloh talks
Mm,
on he did a lot of lectures on you and they're all available on YouTube. So I go back to I think it was like Harvard or he did one for RISD, which is the Rhodes Island or Institute School of Design. I listen to those talks like constantly, basically. Listen to trying to think what else.
I think he really innovated Louis Vuitton, like in what they did.
Yeah, yeah,
Very
and
different.
honestly, I'm not like not to out myself. I've never really liked his clothing, but I love him kind of thing.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, as an individual
Pretty
designer,
much.
creative.
That and I'm a big podcast guy. So I listen to
Give us a few podcasts.
I really remember I think it was like High Snobiety or Hype Beast. They did like an interview series where they had the Haven brothers on there, Errolson Hugh, who's from Acronym and also spent time growing up in Edmonton. Um, a lot of those archives are still up, and I like just peruse that all the time, basically. Um, that and if anything, like we all spend too much time on the internet, but then
That's
for me,
where you draw inspiration from sometimes, though,
I
right?
try to actually like dedicate time to like look at references and look at things, whether it's on the internet or whatever platform, and look at things very critically and be like, oh, I like this. Why do I like this? Is this pulling on something else? Can I research that then? You know?
Right. A lot of times, I really like that because a lot of
Mhm.
times, and I tell our team too, is we get immersed in client work, and we're just
Totally.
doing that. I try to get them to block out time just for that creative research and creative
Mhm.
freedom, and so much more ideas come in that
Yeah, yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah,
Or like outside of even all the inspo stuff, I'll always try like if I'm walking from meeting to meeting or just like about my day, if I'm on a walk, always try and go like no headphones and just like take in the world. And then that's how
you
things kind
seldom
of
see
come.
that these days. Hey,
It's hard. It's
it's
hard to.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you have your own brand, and I know you're really into the brands and quality and fashion. What are some brands that you love that are not yours?
um, I think for me personally, like I'm really into it's like a like we already hit on it. It's like Stussy is one forever.
Hmm.
That's gonna be a big thing for me.
Do they
And
still
that
have flagship stores around the
they
world?
do. They
Yeah,
do. So they got
Japan.
the tribe shops. Japan, Vancouver is the
Yeah.
closest one. Toronto. I always look to them in the sense that they're informed by culture. They have a wide array of doing anything and everything. And I mean, like they've been cool for older than me, basically.
Hmm.
So like
And they
if
stay
anything,
true. They don't
yeah,
shift to like, oh, what's cool right now in the now.
totally.
They
And
stay
like
true to what they are.
that's one thing that's like that's the pure magic of like that's one thing I could aspire to of having a brand. I really love this one brand out of New York called 18 East. So they combine almost like streetwear and skate culture with like artisanal production methods from India
Oh
and putting them
wow.
together in a cool mix. I really love Ame Leon d'Or as that's kind of a
I
big
can
like
never get my hands on
ubiquitous.
the shoes.
And specifically like I mean I've been shopping from them for a while, but like the way they present product is
Right.
like the what I always look to them to and what a lot of people look to them to, you know? I really like this one brand which is like full on suiting. It's called Drake's, not the rapper, like from I believe like the UK. But yeah, if anything, I look to a lot of like actually old school like tailoring brands these days.
Right.
And then me personally, I dress really boring, so I wear like Carhartt.
It's classic Edmonton,
Yeah,
Alberta
it's
wear.
workwear. I was really like gorped and tech weared out when I was in Vancouver and wearing Gore-Tex everywhere. But when
Yeah.
I came back to Edmonton, I just found myself wearing like old Carhartt all the
Yeah.
time.
I'm a fan of Gore-Tex and Arc'teryx, but also, workwear, like, I like brands like Human Made and
Totally,
what they're doing. They're
totally.
really bringing that American workwear into their,
Mhm.
what they're releasing.
It's like you don't see it in our product, but like me personally, I really love everything and have always loved everything coming from Japan and like how serious of a craft they take it
Right.
down there.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, what's next for you personally? Staying here, going out, Vancouver, wherever, or
I mean,
what's next to your journey?
these days I'm always kind of jumping. Like as much as I spend a lot of time in Edmonton, I'm in Vancouver and Toronto quite a bit.
Hmm.
Whether it's like for work or for family, just kind of hanging out. And then I got to spend some time in Asia coming up in the new year, so I'm doing that.
Amazing. Where are you going?
Philippines for a little bit, and then doing
Nice.
some traveling around there. That and then I think the big thing that I'll kind of let slip is like our crew is really into this idea of like taking our show on the road. Of like
Okay.
we're not only bringing Edmonton here, we want to bring Edmonton to like new places. So
That's awesome.
mhm.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being here
Mm.
today. It was
Thank you for
amazing
having me.
chop it up with you and learn about your journey. I think there's a lot of awesome gems that, teach others about fashion and
Thank
what
you,
you're up
thank you,
to.
thank
Yeah.
you.
All right.
All right.